So I wanted to talk to you today about malingering. And it's one of the things that when I go and speak to organisations, especially when we're in HR areas, a lot of people will say, but with regards to workers' comp, oh yeah, Kerry, but there's a lot of malingering. But I think it's an unreasonable assessment that we make because even from a psychological perspective, it's very difficult to actually determine what malingering really is. And, you know, essentially malingering at its true form, the meaning or the definition specifically says that you're feigning an injury or you're feigning illness in order to avoid work. And I find it something that gets thrown around a lot, and yet I think it's an unreasonable assessment to make, especially with regards to people who are on workers' compensation. So when you have a look at the psychological assessment that's made when we start looking at malingering, even from that perspective, I find it really difficult because in essence, you get a decision tree as a psychologist that says, can you determine what medical issue is sitting here or not? And, you know, if there's no other explanation, basically it's like, are they lying? And the only answer is yes. And so then the determination is, it's not whether they're lying or not, it's what type of liar are they. And I just think that it's a really unreasonable thing to do because mental health, as we know, is one of those things that's often seen as it's a silent issue, it's a silent injury. It's not an easily identifiable or seen thing. And you would have thought that with what we've seen in COVID times in the last 12 months, that we can understand a lot better how we can have good justifiable reasons to need to respond to something that we actually can't see or identify. And yet, as a community, we've become very aware of the fact that it is real. And even though in Australia we've been very lucky to avoid it having a huge impact here, it's still having an impact, but we don't question it. In much the same way as we found there were conspiracy theorists around COVID who sort of said, oh, it all comes from 5G towers, or it's not real, it's just a way to control us. I want you to think about malingering in the same way, or people that perceive malingering it's the same. It's perceived in the same way as a conspiracy theory might be conceived. It also, we become subjected to what we call a primacy and recency effect, especially when we work in HR areas. So I want you to think about what happens when you buy a new car. So you buy yourself a red BMW and you've never seen the sort of version that you bought for yourself until you buy one, and then you see them everywhere. So in much the same way, that's what we call in psychological terms a primacy or a recency effect. It's more in your, brain's purview to notice all of the red BMWs because you bought one. And when you didn't see them before, it was because you weren't driving one. When you work in HR and you see people, or you work in injury management and you see people all the time, I mean, that's your job, right? It's to deal with those people day in, day out. You often develop perceptions around them that are biased. They're extreme rather than a balance of, what happens in the broader society, because that's what you're looking at all day, every day. And I just want to caution you with that idea about the labelling as actually being more of a representation of your perspective on it rather than it being a reality. Because the reality of true malingering, it's actually really small percentage. It's like years ago I used to work for Centrelink, and I always said if I become one of those people that when a person walks in the door, my immediate reaction to them is, oh, here comes another one to rip off the system. It was time to get out. So I just want you to just be conscious of the fact that whenever we see something on an ongoing basis, so if we work in a role that exposes us to that regularly, our perception is going to be skewed by that. So you're looking at it through a different lens. And in reality, malingering isn't something that really exists very much in our organisations at all. And if we changed our approach to the way that we deal with our working people who develop issues and need to go off on workers' compensation, maybe then any perception of malingering would actually disappear because they don't have to exaggerate their symptoms or whatever it is that you think that they're doing in order to get you to assist them. All right, so it's just really important, I think, let's try and stop using malingering as a word in relation to anybody who needs to go off work for any reason. If we actually validate their experiences and treat them like human beings, you'd be surprised at how quickly they'll come back to work. All right, see you soon.